Have you ever thought about what it would be like to design your own signature pedal? Would you go for the thing you most want, or would you try to come up with something as useful as possible for other people? Would you get obsessed with what colors it would be or what the layout would be like? I recently spoke with Andrew Huang, who designed his own signature pedal, the Ghost, with endorphins, and I asked him these exact questions, including what the hardest part was. So if you want to know what it's really like, keep watching. Hello, Andrew. How are you today?
I'm good. Hey, yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, so let's get right into it. The Ghost pedal, your signature pedal. Um, the first thing I was curious about is that this pedal is not doing any one thing, and the many things it is doing, it's sort of like an unusual combination,
Hmm.
and many of the features the individual things can do are also unusual. So, like, how did you have the idea for this pedal to be like the Andrew Dream pedal?
It's like a combination of a lot of things. I guess, I mean, I wouldn't say it's like my dream pedal. I think it's just something, an idea that felt like it could be really cool. I don't know if there's a dream pedal out there. We had a conversation that led to the Eurorack module, me and Endorphins, who I partnered with on this. And um, out of that one conversation, actually, we had two module ideas, and then one of the modules that we put out first, Ghost, now became the Ghost pedal. And so it was really about um like the core of it is I like the idea of rearranging effects really easily, and that's not something you find too often. And so based on that and like the types of effects that we thought would be good for it, and the types of DSP that endorphins already had in their systems, we kind of figured it out for the module. And then there was a lot of demand for the pedal, and so when we started working on that, we started thinking of cool new things that we could do in the pedal world that were like less common, or maybe hadn't even been done before. And so I think um, a lot of it isn't even necessarily about the exact effects in there, but about how you can interact with the modulation system to like make them do more out there things that you don't normally find.
Based on what you just said, and based on the videos of yours I've seen where you like talk about the Ghost, it's clear you have a lot of pride in like the fact that hitting the secondary functions is like not a nightmare. You know, it's like the UI is very painless and good. How much were you involved in the UI specifically, and also just completely non-musical aspects of the pedal, like what it looks like?
Yeah, there was an interesting alignment between me and Endorphins because they were headed in this kind of more straightforward, minimal direction. Like if you look at their early stuff, which I was also really drawn to, like I have one of their synths, the shuttle system, which is like a gold panel and it's got all these cartoony doodles on it, and stuff is named weird. Like instead of envelopes, you have like airplanes or something. You know
Right,
what I
right,
mean?
right.
Take off, stuff like that. And so that used to be kind of their vibe. And then they just switched over and they're like, we love silver panels, which I was already all about. We love everything super clearly labeled. Um, and so we definitely aligned on that because I mean, my vibe is very minimal. And in my videos, I try to be really transparent about the creative process, all that kind of stuff. So just trying to be like direct, and this is what it is. So it was great that we were right there together on that. And then in terms of the like layout and stuff like that, I mean, I would just give feedback basically on any aspect of the pedal as things were going. We went through a few different iterations of like moving the big pieces around, like where should each knob and button be, and a little bit of changing the names of the labels around, but mostly there's like one obvious answer for that kind of thing. And yeah, just like from trying things out, figuring out like what feels like the most intuitive workflow. Like I think workflow is the key thing for me. It's like we're trying to do something a little bit out there, a little bit different, a little bit complicated in some ways maybe. And how do you make sure that like the person who's using it isn't going to be mad at it. Like, we want to reduce that as much as possible because I've been there so many times.
I like that. I think in a way, like your pedal is like a workflow pedal. You know what I mean? There's like
The
distortion
tweakers
pedals,
pedal. Yeah.
there's like reverb pedals. Like yours is like a workflow pedal, which I think is good. Like there aren't, it's in a class of its own with that in some ways. Okay, all right. So in terms of like the design revision, going back and forth, feedback, and this and that, when I'm sending out like a song of mine to get mixed and I'm going back and forth and I have like mix notes for the producer or whatever, I'm at a point where I feel like it's bad for both of us if there's like a bazillion rounds of mix revision. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, one, I'm aware, like, if I have that many problems, like, maybe I'm being the dummy. Two, it's like if I keep sending it back, at some point, we're both going to get fatigued from listening to this many different versions. And I just, like, I start to doubt whether anyone can really hear the difference after however many mix revisions. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I've been in that position a bunch of times. I've never designed a signature pedal. At what point did you ever feel like, okay, this has to be my last round of revisions, or were you sort of didn't have that many to begin with, or was it something you were even thinking about or self-conscious about?
It's interesting. I've never drawn that parallel because it actually was a completely different process. And it was definitely like the more revisions we did, the better. And we probably had hundreds of emails, and some of them would be like pages long. And it would literally be like, 10 to 12 on the distortion knob feels like there needs to be more gain compensation, like that level of detail, along with like, here's a sketch I did where like five of the knobs are in a new place. What do you think? And there was just, so many things like that. And I think it's like a really complicated thing. I mean, I don't know how you would compare it to like a song, which also has lots of stuff going on. But yeah, it never really occurred to me that the revisions were like that much more intense and frequent. But I think that was necessary to make a product like this.
I'm gonna say right now, like even though we're like in the early stage of this convo, the most astounding thing you will have said to me is that part of this process included very long emails, and it was a good process. Like it's very exciting
Yeah.
to me that like long emails happened, and then it was good.
Yeah, that's fair. That's not always the case. I mean, me and Andreas, who was the person who I was mostly conversing with on endorphins about like the technical side of things, I think we were both really good at being like really specific about feedback. And we usually didn't disagree about anything. It was just like, what's the best answer? And like we would, you know, each suggest a ton of different things. And then yeah, he would be like, "Oh, here's what I changed since the last revision," and I'd be like, "Oh, here's what I discovered in my last testing," and it would just be like a lot of back and forth. But it was like, yeah, definitely an epic level of emailing. Like it got to the point where we would be like bolding stuff and like here's like categorizing, like this is the I'm going to talk about the modulation section. I got to talk about the delay, or like it would all be very organized in a way to be
Dude,
able
I
to.
think you got to start making instructional videos about email because like it's thrilling to me to know that like there is a world and there's people in this world where they like bold sections of their email and it's like done effectively and it's like good that people are doing that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
well, it's funny because like I think, realized pretty early on that both of us worked better this way than having a call. Because on a call, like it's great for brainstorming, you throw ideas around really fast, but you have to kind of like go away and figure out a big chunk of it by yourself and be like, okay, I thought about this and this and this. And when I put it all together, I feel like this is a cool solution. And then you can present it. Um, and yeah, it was just easier for us to like just type it out and send those off.
So I'm in the early stages. I've been in the early stages a couple times, like talking to people about signature pedals, but none of it has ever been DSP. And one thing that has happened fairly often is like I'll be like, "Is there a way to do such and such?" And the answer will just be like, "No," like because of hardware reasons. No, like the chips that do the waveforms can't do that waveform. Uh, is that is there a version of that in DSP world?
There was one thing that we couldn't do. I wanted the effect switching order to be instantaneous because that would be another fun thing where you could just like
You could play that.
instantly and clicklessly just like use that as a performative thing. And that, it just wasn't fast enough for that to happen. There needs to be that like split second where it changes them around. That was the only like hard no I think that I got on a big feature.
If you just get the pedal and like take it out of the box, are those 9 presets like already filled with factory presets?
Yeah, there's 9 that I made in there, and it was kind of to try and show a breadth of what's possible on it. But we definitely encourage people to just like write over them.
How long did it take you, and like how self-conscious did you get about making those 9?
um, I got pretty fast at dialing in interesting sounds because through the beta testing, I was just like playing with the pedals so much. So I think I actually sat down and did all 9 of those in like an hour or something like that. But I had been like familiar with like, oh, this is the type of thing I want to do. Like I want to have a wah one for sure. I want to have a bit crush one for sure, and like could quickly get those settings into what I thought were sweet spots.
I'm impressed you did it in an hour. I feel like I would have stalled out. I would have been like, this is my chance to show everybody the 9 best sound. And then as soon as you decide it's that important, as soon as I decide it's that important, it's just you're fucked. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm just in like a get shit done mindset.
Yeah, clearly. Between this and the emails, I'm like sort of amazed at like just the overall level of efficiency and like effectualness that
Mm,
went into the making of this pedal. On your YouTube channel, very recently, there's a video where you talk about how your issues with hearing loss has like shaped your thinking about your own work artistically,
mm,
and the difference between like making something for yourself versus making something for the audience. Okay, so that's you talking about your music. To
mm.
what extent, as you were making this pedal, were you thinking, this is just what I would want if I could have anything? And how much were you thinking, this is what I think other people would find useful?
That's a good question. I feel like in terms of a piece of gear, it's a little more like the maker and the audience are probably have more overlap. I think sometimes artists like we just want to try something crazy and we don't know who's going to be on board. And so maybe it was is easier in this process. I will say like yeah, I was thinking about what the flow was going to be like because that's what I'm going to appreciate, and like what are the possibilities going to be like, and how do we make it easy to understand. So we were like trying to prioritize stuff that we thought as users ourselves would be important. I would say like the difference would be in things like I don't really tend to hook my pedals up to MIDI too much. But we got to put that in. It's like something that a lot of people do. So there's like some stuff like that where I feel like that's not going to be my use case, but we should include it for just making it a well-rounded product.
What was the hardest part about this that you did not expect to be hard?
Oh, great question. Yeah. Well, some of the hard stuff I actually enjoyed, like figuring out the knob layout was weirdly satisfying.
You gotta
Or
you
like when
gotta
it
say
finally
more about
clicked, we
like
were
what's
yeah.
like what was satisfying about dealing with knob layout.
I think it was because we had the where the like um modulation stuff was, we were like we're a little bit confined to like we got 2 rows of knobs and like these are where the buttons are going to be. And so we're like moving things around in there, and I think it was because there is some of the effects have an odd number of parameters and some of the effects have an even. So it couldn't just be like, here's the 2 knobs for this, the 2 knobs for this, the 2 knobs for this. It was like one of them's got to be like a 3 for. And so that was the puzzle piece. And it was like, okay, do we have like modulation going vertically, horizontally? Like where do we put boxes and stuff like that? And I feel like what we landed on after like iterating a bunch was like the most sensible way to do it.
How many times did you have the thing where you're like, we're pretty much done. I'm sure we're done. I'm just gonna play this one. Just gonna play it a little bit just to make sure we're done, but I'm sure we're done. And then you found shit and you're like, okay, we're not done.
Yeah, I guess well, thanks to the possibility of firmware updates, we can still like get some improvements in there. I think that we had a pretty good feeling about it, and yeah, the kind of like final things that we were fine tuning were like some of the parameter ranges of just like, oh, like maybe we can like really get this feel. I guess the hardest part for that I think is volume, because I think due to all the wide parameter ranges and all the effects being able to go in any order, it's like not the easiest to make sure that it's going to be pretty even no matter what you do. So it was that kind of thing at the end where we were like, okay, let's try and like get as many of the things, in the same world as possible, and then we'll feel like it's done. But we had definitely for like a couple months felt like the layouts there, the sounds there.
Then you also said there's like a little bit of limiting happening somewhere in there. Was it tempting to give people a knob for the limiter?
I think that became that would be like too much control, and one of the ways where it'd be like easy to kind of like get something sounding too bad, or like losing audio, having stuff jump up way loud. So yeah, we didn't really discuss that.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't even like tempting.
Yeah, I mean, we have compression on there, and then like a master output, but yeah, we figured like with that, hopefully the user can kind of like what they want to
I'm
be. But
I'm impressed how much you like don't get bogged down by the dysfunctional thing. Like I'll be honest with you, like anytime I'm doing anything, there, like at some moment there'll be this idea that's like clearly the terrible idea. Like, should we give people control over the limiter that we put in there just so things stay under control? And I'm like, that is the terrible idea. And then like there's a part of me that's always like, but we still have to think about it. You know what I mean? And like,
yeah.
and that's why like then that's the end of it being a good experience. So I'm like truly struck by how much you throughout this whole thing are like able to just like not get sucked into the obvious terrible idea.
That's such a funny point. I'm trying to think if there was like some stuff that we like really got stuck on. Um, I think like the only thing that comes to mind is I would be like, uh, I'd suggest something and they'd be like, yeah, that's a really good idea. And then they wouldn't do it for a while. And I'd be like, did you guys like think it was a bad idea? Or like, and I'd like kind of bring it up a few times, but it was always just like, oh yeah, I mean, we haven't got to that yet. Like it's still on the list.
Have there been firmware updates so far?
Yeah, I want to say we're on 1.3 now. And yeah, it's about like fine tuning some of that stuff. And I think there was like a MIDI improvement, but yeah.
Has endorphins given you clear parameters for when a firmware update would go from like 1 point something to 2 point something?
Uh I don't know. Um yeah, I don't know how people tend to like decide what is a big update versus a small update. Um
I mean, the reason I asked is that like you're describing like a very ideal good collaboration where like you're on the same page and like everybody's understanding each other. And I just think it would be sort of amazing if like the relationship is ruined because you have like a really passionate disagreement about like the numerical coding system for the firmware updates. Like that's what I want. I want you to be like, this is clearly a 2.0 firmware update. And Andreas is like, I'll die before I let that happen.
yeah,
that's
no,
that's the ending to the story that I want as the audience.